Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. I never could have imagined that purchasing my dream mountain retreat would lead to such a dramatic confrontation with a deranged stranger trying to steal from me. Let me back up and start from the beginning. As an avid hiker and nature lover, I had dreamed for years of owning a cozy cabin tucked away in the lush green mountains. After saving up enough money from my engineering job in the city, I was finally able to make that dream a reality last spring. I found a charming log cabin on 5 sprawling wooded acres high up in the Smoky Mountains. The property was perfect, remote enough for privacy, but still close enough to town for supplies. After signing the paperwork and getting the keys, I eagerly made the drive up the winding mountain roads to check out my new cabin. As expected, the place needed some work after sitting vacant for so long, but I didn't mind rolling up my sleeves to fix it up. I started by hiring an electrician to get the power hooked up so I could begin staying there on weekends as I made repairs. Those first few trips were magical. The crisp mountain air, stunning vistas, and tranquility were just what I needed as an escape from my hectic urban life. Each weekend, I would drive up Friday evening with supplies and get to work improving the cabin. It was tiring but rewarding work. By Sunday afternoon, when I would lock up and head home, I felt renewed and rejuvenated. But my off-the-grid bliss was shattered during my last trip up 3 weeks ago. As soon as I arrived on Friday night, I noticed something was off. The lights in the cabin seemed unusually bright. I checked the brand new electric meter I had installed and saw it was spinning rapidly. This struck me as very odd since I hadn't even turned on any appliances yet. A creeping suspicion took hold of me. Was someone stealing electricity from my cabin while I was away during the week? As an engineer, I knew the cabin's electrical system well. The 100-amp service I had installed would only spin the meter that fast if large appliances were running constant. Anger and violation washed over me at the thought of someone trespassing and freeloading off my utility service. Well, I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I decided to camp out in my truck down the road and stake out my property to try catching the perpetrator. The next morning, I cautiously drove past the cabin and parked out of sight. I had a clear view of the driveway from my vantage point. For hours, I nervously sipped coffee, wondering if my hunch was right. Then around noon, a white SUV came creeping down the driveway. My pulse raced as I watched through binoculars while a woman haughtily marched up to the outlet near my front door. She glanced around furtively before pulling out a long orange extension cord and plugging it into the outlet. I had her now. This brazen freeloader was deliberately stealing my electricity in broad daylight. Adrenaline pumping, I sprinted from my truck to confront the thief. "What do you think you're doing?" I yelled. "This is my property! You're stealing my electricity!" The frizzy-haired blonde woman whirled around, looking startled, but her shock quickly turned to indignation. "Who do you think you are accosting me like this?" she shouted back. "I have every right to use this outlet for my needs." I was incredulous at her audacity. "No, you absolutely do not," I countered firmly. "I'm the owner of this cabin and I pay the utility bills here, not you. Now unplug from my outlet immediately and get off my land before I call the police." The entitled woman became irate. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "I've been using this cabin's electricity for weeks. I need it more than you. My power got cut off because I couldn't afford the bills." Her confession made my blood boil. So she had been freeloading off me for weeks. "Not my problem. You're trespassing and stealing," I said coldly. "Last warning, unplug and leave now or the cops will haul you off for theft." The woman crossed her arms defiantly. "Go ahead and call them. The police won't do anything to me. I'll just tell them I'm renting here." Now she was trying to blatantly lie and manipulate the law to avoid consequences. That did it for me. I swiftly dialed cop and told the dispatcher I had an intruder illegally tapping my property's electricity. Within 10 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 uniformed officers stepped out. I quickly showed them my deed, utility bills, and meter readings to prove the cabin and electric service were mine. Meanwhile, the woman arrogantly told the officers she was a temporary tenant. Outright fiction. Thankfully, the cops were not fooled by her lies and excuses. They asked to see a rental agreement or permission from me to be there. When she produced no proof, they swiftly cuffed her hands behind her back. "No, you can't do this to me," she protested loudly as they led her to the cruiser. "I need that electricity. This is unlawful discrimination." I couldn't help but smirk and wave smugly as the officers put her in the back seat and slammed the door. Before driving off, they took my statement and recommended I file a formal theft complaint at the station. The satisfying sight of her angry face glaring out the window as the cruiser pulled away is seared in my memory. In the end, justice prevailed. The police charged the woman with multiple crimes, including trespassing, theft, and fraud. I later learned she had illegally tapped power from other properties in the area before I caught her. She earned herself some jail time and a permanent criminal record. I couldn't be happier with the outcome. The audacity of that entitled, scheming thief, thinking she could just steal and freeload with no consequences. She definitely messed with the wrong law-abiding property owner. Hopefully she finally learned her lesson that stealing electricity to avoid paying bills is not only unethical, but also downright foolish. I'll gladly sacrifice a weekend testifying against her in court if it means this criminally selfish Karen can't victimize others. My dramatic confrontation with her was a hassle, but also rewarding in knowing that justice was served. The next one is a pro-revenge story. To start the story, some background you need to know about me. I volunteer to train and raise service dogs. My fiancé says clearly I have a look that says I am weak and a pushover. I have constant encounters with Karens who are just not ready for my responses when they engage me. I have been in the military for 17 years when this happened, and I was responsible for managing over 130 service members. I am anything but a pushover. I work with civilians, so I have cultivated a polite exterior because I was counseled for looking unapproachable and scary to civilian counterparts. The story, as I said, I raise service animals, so I fall under the ADA when it comes to regulations on where and what I can do with my puppy. We'll call him OO, is an amazingly behaved black lab of 6 months. I have cultivated a level of trust and obedience where I can leave him in a sit with other dogs around. So long as I am in eyesight, he will stay. I have raised a few pups by then, and I would never have done that with them. But O is amazing, and I can't wait to get him back after his tour of duty helping Mrs. C be independent. I meet the Homeowners Association's Karen one Saturday. My fiancé, O, and I were going to head on a road trip to visit my fiancé's parents. In our preparation, the last on the list is always getting the kids to use the bathroom before a long trip. So we head out, O gets busy, and I grab a bag to clean it up. I put him in a sit-stay and hand the leash to my girl, and I start walking to the trash can. It's about 100 feet from where he went. I have a clear line of sight to the dog, and he is sitting pretty and alert, watching me intently for a hand cue or voice command. As I'm walking, I hear a womanly screech. I don't quite make it out, but it sounds angry. I ignore it and keep walking to the dumpster, deposit my waste bag, and turn around to head back to my two favorite people. It is then I make eye contact with the Homeowners Association's Karen from here on out. She is your typical Karen, not an inch over 5 feet and has the same circumference. The short chopped hair that says I'm the manager now. She looks me in the eyes and I finally listen to her shrill scream of, "Your dog must be on a leash and in your hand. My county's state law says so. I will call the cops." Now I don't do ignorant, and respect given is respect earned. I was willing to try and de-escalate. My fiancé owns the condo and is super non-confrontational, so for her, I try to bring it back down to civil levels of discussion. In a polite but firm voice, I asked if she even looked over at the dog before she started yelling at me. She just bellows like a banshee again, and I repeat. This back and forth happens 3 or 4 times, me calm, her escalating in pitch and volume. At this point, she hasn't given respect, so none is required to be given back. I break out my "you done ducked up" NCO to Junior voice. It is loud, firm, and clearly states, "I'm done with your bullcrap, lady." I clearly tell her if she would have taken 2 seconds to look, she would see the dog is sitting on a leash in someone's hands. She stops bellowing at me, looks, and turns a bit red in the face, then musters, "You could just say thank you," which I curtly reply to, "Shut the duck up and get out of my face." She waddles quickly off, tail tucked into her condo door. My next meeting with her was when I was grilling. The Homeowners Association states no charcoal grills and no smoking BBQ. I was born in the North, but as a military brat, moved to the South since I was 2. There is a difference between BBQing and grilling. BBQ is 12 plus hours with coals of hardwood or wood smoking. Grilling is cooking meat on a grill instead of the stove. The Homeowners Associations put out a reminder, no BBQing on the premises and no coals. So I was like, awesome, get a small propane grill. It's not BBQ, but it's better than nothing. So I was out grilling, and I hear the banshee cry all too familiar now. Again, she didn't come up to me and talk. She just started screaming. So I looked her right in the eye and with the same firm voice, "Shut the duck up and go away. If you say one more word, I'll be the one calling the cops for harassment by an Homeowners Association's member." She sputtered something about no grilling or open flames, and I told her, "Duck off, show me in writing and by someone other than her." She waddled off, and then I was approached by the Homeowners Association's president with the Homeowners Association's bylaws and sat to read them. During which my fiancée started a conversation with them about another issue we were having with them. She was in the middle of having the state attorney's office ask some questions about activities they were trying to force her into paying for. It wasn't going well for the homeowners associations, and she took this opportunity to introduce herself. While she may be non-confrontational when it comes to small things, she will stand up for herself when it comes to it. Her introducing herself changed everyone's tone, and they became oh so polite. Karen tried to play the victim to her and say I was mean and could use some manners when engaging with people. I love my soon-to-be wife. She let her paint her tale how she was a victim. When she finished, she looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You know I was the one holding the leash, and I was standing right here when he was grilling, so no, you got the same respect you gave." She paled and faded to the back. That's when the president of the Homeowners Association stepped in and told me I can't have the grill, and that I can be fined, and I needed to follow the rules of the Homeowners Associations, or the next time he'll be the one calling the cops. Well, press Roger that. It is my job to enforce regulations in the military. I spend hours reading instructions. Nothing pleases me more than when I can shove the black and white in an a-hole's face at work to get my guys what they are owed, or to force them to do the job right. So you want me to follow the rules? Copy that, buddy. So I began my research. I found a few interesting things. No homeowners association's bylaw can be enforced if it is not in the state database. This particular homeowners association's bylaws were last updated in 1994. It was 2016. They state they follow my county's fire code, which follows NFPA. Finally, the GEM, the exact latitude and longitude coordinates of the homeowners association's property lines. So I get a login for the state's database and print the homeowners association's bylaws. I print the NFPA, which states that in a multifamily home, you can store propane tanks no bigger than 2.7 liters, but they can total no more than 5.4 liters cumulatively. I go to Lowe's, get a rope, tape measure, and stakes. I pull up Google Maps and mark the Homeowners Association's boundary line on it. Lo and behold, what do I find? A drainage ditch that is city property not 10 feet from where I was grilling. So I take my coordinates, my stakes, and carefully mark off the section of city property. Now for the revenge, I call the city-county fire departments and request a permit to grill on said city property. They said, "Go for it, you don't need a permit for it, no one would care." I insisted, and they said it's my $50. They issued an event open flame. So with both permits, it was $100, but I got permission from the city to grill there for 6 months. The next day at 7 a.m., I went to set up. I carefully measured so I was at least 3 feet into the city property, set up my cooler with enough meat and beer to grill till doomsday, then waited for the fireworks. It didn't take long for Karen to come screaming at me. I mean, I was 10 feet from the community pool and 3 feet from the sidewalk gazebo that led to the pool. I just hit record on my phone and politely told her she has no need to yell, and I'm breaking no laws. She kept screaming about no grilling and how she is tired of me, and she's going to get me arrested and kicked out if it's the last thing she does. She hasn't liked me since she saw me and has just been waiting to get me kicked out. That now that she knows which condo is mine, it is just a matter of time till she finds something. On and on. I guess me being polite and showing zero fear was pissing her off. She tried to come take my stuff. Big no-no. As she reached for my cooler, I broke out my NCO voice and told her if she so much as brushed a finger against my property, I would remove the offending body part with force if necessary. This sent her scurrying off again. About 20 minutes later, I see 2 cop cars pull up, and Mr. Homeowners Association's president himself. He is all chummy with the cops, and as they approach, I hear him say, "Yep, same guy. I already told him once before he can't grill on the Homeowners Association's grounds." He comes to a stop about 10 feet from me. One cop stays with him, the other keeps walking up to me. I have a crap-eating grin on my face. I can hardly wait for the conversation to happen. The cop is slightly put off by my joyous face and slight giggle when I ask, "What seems to be the problem, officer?" I get informed that I am in violation of the bylaws and have been warned once already, and I am going to receive a ticket for disturbing the peace for threatening the homeowners associations when they were trying to enforce the rules, a ticket for an illegal open flame, a ticket for illegal storage of flammable substances, and on and on. The last was if I didn't pack up, I would be arrested and removed. Now that he was done, I first handed him my permit from the city to grill. He took it, walked back to the president, and they discussed it for a moment, then returned. He says, "You can't get a permit from the city to grill on private property." I then showed him the coordinates for the homeowners associations, and the Google Maps gridded drawing, and my current GPS location. Mind you, I am smiling, handing sheet after sheet to him because the grid was not all on one sheet and had addendums. It took about 4 minutes to explain it to him. As I was about to hand him more, he held up a hand to stop me. He then asked how long I had planned this with a smirk. I told him, "Oh, about a week." He gave me a look of disbelief but moved on. He then asked me if I threatened Karen. I just played back the recording to him. At the end, he said, "Nothing seems out of place here. You're free to go." I stopped him and asked if I could file a complaint for homeowners association's harassment through him. He said no, that the city clerk's office is the correct place, but he would document harassment by the two of them and file the report for me. In my state, it's illegal to be harassed by the homeowners associations. It comes with jail time of a few months, fines as high as $5,000, immediate removal from the board, and the possibility of recovering damages. I settled for them both being removed from the board instead of filing a complaint. I waved to Karen every day I grilled or showed her my leash if I had O. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was a paramedic for 15 years and have since left to pursue a trade. I'm not entirely bitter. I just needed to leave due to burnout. So long, and thanks for all the PTSD, am I right? Anyways, a number of years ago, when I was a shift supervisor, I had a 2-time run-in with my city's head Karen. This was a medium-sized city, and as a working supervisor, I would go on calls. We didn't have high call volumes, but like any populated area, we had colorful encounters. One Saturday night, we were called out to a domestic violence incident, which unfortunately happens from time to time. We would go to support the police or treat a victim. Family violence is always an unfun night on the town with high emotion mixed in. No one likes going to these, but I've noticed that the worst places to attend calls are the richer areas of town. This was a suburb of McMansions, which range from uninspired architecture to god-awful monstrosities of poor taste. There's lots of petrodollars here. Not every household was like this, of course, but sometimes the math worked out thusly. Entitlement plus money plus low class plus no emotional regulation ability X booze to =a real Cirque du Dismay for everyone. Arriving at this house for one male in his late 40s, his brother-in-law had assaulted him. His wife, the Karen in our story, wasn't taking his side, and would periodically interrupt us to scold or insult him. The argument, whatever it was, had degenerated into lobbed insults by the time we got there, and the 5 adults in the house were being poorly quieted by the police. The incident was a trivial argument escalated to simple assault. A guest called cop. Our patient and his brother-in-law discovered in different ways that expensive wine bottles are resilient and, when swung at the head, act more like a club than a piece of prop comedy. When we got to our patient, he was sitting in a chair, lucid but 3 sheets to the wind on white wine like everyone else in the house. He'd been smacked right in the center of the forehead with no loss of consciousness, just a bump and a bleed. He was stable but intoxicated. During our assessment, we discovered he was on an opioid painkiller, which he had been taking at a rate 4 times higher than recommended on the label. My reaction was, "How many of these have you been taking? How many did you take tonight? You should not be taking that much and drinking. Tell me what you took." Opioid overdose thankfully didn't occur. Between the lack of presentation and his wife's loud interjections, I'm confident they were all just drunk. Karen, during our assembly, would butt in and talk over us. I'd shoo her off, she'd circle around again, repeat. That was until I grew tired and weary of this dance and asked one of the cops to give her a timeout while we worked. Under a fusillade of ugly words half directed at me and half at the police, she was told her cooperation would be nice but not required. I had been exposed to this environment more than enough to want to leave. So we packed our patient in the ambulance and finished the call with a drop-off at an ER department. The real fun began the night after when our patient's wife called to launch one doozy of a complaint. Bad luck for both of us, I took that complaint. But good luck for me, she didn't ask for a name and I didn't volunteer it. She got what she wanted, a supervisor. I listened to the litany of complaints without rapt attention, taking notes and bewildered by someone who appeared to hate their husband so much but would bother complaining. She used me like a grievance tampon for about 15 minutes, but it boiled down to 3 main points. It was outrageous for paramedics to be giving her husband medication advice because we aren't doctors. Valid point, but she was missing the crux of that line of questioning. His abuse of pills was a going concern. We made her husband, the lightly wounded, walk with us to the ambulance. She knows that's an incredibly incompetent and negligent act by the paramedics because of what she gleaned from her last first aid course. You don't move people with head injuries. After that absolute trombone slide of a sentence, I could barely contain myself. Right, you don't move people. I do that. It's my literal job. She wanted to go in the ambulance, but it drove off without her. Yeah, I did that, and on purpose, while she was in her time out with an officer. Guess why? There was also some other assorted word garbage, mostly born of impotent, poorly thought out rage. When she was done venting visceral hate into my ear, I let her know we would be back in touch after an investigation. Following my sense of duty and ethics, I squealed on myself, reporting everything to my chief the next day. I went in early before my shift, laid it all out for him, and invited him with a barely suppressed giggle to investigate fully. With an unimpressed look that segued into an eye roll, he told me to handle it in a professional manner. So, taking his cue, I decided to call up Karen and lie almost nonstop to her. During our follow-up call after the exhaustive investigation, I layered on the fluff and platitudes with a trowel. I had to, it was thick. Karen soaked it all in, and I'm sure nearly climaxed when I mentioned disciplinary action taken. We parted ways and hung up, end of interactions. Satisfied I had properly resolved this issue, I turned to the group of coworkers in the room, listening in while she was on speakerphone. Then we collapsed into laughter. To this day, I'm sure she believes I was punished. I'm also sure it was all because I gave her a timeout in her own gaudy HGTV nightmare. She should look at the scoreboard. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.